Sixers Heat Game 4 in Miami was an absolute bloodbath as Philadelphia got blown out. Now this series shifts back to Philadelphia for Game 6. And I don't want to focus on the negatives here. I want to start today's show with a positive. I want all of you watching right now to let me know in the comment section which year you became a fan of the Philadelphia 76ers. For me, it was 1996 after Allen Iverson got drafted. I loved him so much I approached my mom and asked her if I could get cornrows and tattoos. At the time, she said no. And then a few years later, she still said no. Either way, love this basketball team. I know you do as well. Let me know when you started riding with Philadelphia. You're watching 76ers Now by Chat Sports. I'm your host, Chase Senior. We're going to recap that awful Game 4 performance from the 76ers in South Beach last night as the Miami Heat culture was fully on display against a Sixers team that lacked all types of energy. Then later on today's show, we're going to take a look at three superstar players who the Sixers could replace James Harden with if he doesn't opt into his deal and if he doesn't come back to this basketball team. Game 5 final, 120-85. That is not a misprint. You are not looking at some crazy score on your screen. It actually happened last night. I thought this was just a terrible performance right from the tip for the Philadelphia 76ers. It was just awful on all fronts. James Harden didn't look anything like he did in Game 4. Joel Embiid, his energy was off. We'll get to what the national broadcast had to say about him because the narrative continues to be ridiculous around him. People just hate the process. But the Heat were really, really good. Jimmy Butler leading the charge, 23 points, 9 rebounds, and 6 times. Max Strus was also really good, hitting some three-pointers in that first frame, finished with 19. Gabe Vincent, another one of those role players who cannot play well on the road, but played well at home with 15 points. And then Embiid with 17, James Harden with 14, Tobias Harris with 12. Sixers need better production from everybody in Game 6 as this series comes back to the Wells Fargo Center. My biggest takeaways from watching this game last night, first of all, my eyes are bleeding, but first, the Sixers' effort sucked. I saw that clip from John Clark of NBC Sports Philadelphia of the Sixers meeting in the tunnel prior to the game. James Harden was like, "We've been one of the best road teams all year. Let's run it back. Let's catch a dub and steal a victory." It did not happen. Philadelphia was flat right from the get-go. I thought, okay, James Harden, after a marvelous Game 4 performance in front of the home crowd, can he do it again with a hobbled and injured Joel Embiid? That was not the case. He looked slow and sluggish once more. Embiid really looked off, and the bench production was really, really bad. And it's funny, there's this narrative and there's this saying that bench players play well in the playoffs at home and they don't really give you much production on the road. That has been the case for this playoff series between Philly and Miami, as well as that Mavericks and Phoenix Suns series. The role players have stepped up in their own friendly confines. When they've had to hit the road, they have not performed well at all. That's going to have to change if the Sixers win Game 6, because then it comes down to a do or die Game 7. Shout out to Hugh Douglas back in the day. It's do or die, baby. It's do or die. I also want to hit this. The national broadcast was reaching for Joel Embiid narratives last night. It was really, really weird. There was a report from Chris Haynes when he was on the sideline saying, "I was watching warm-ups today and Embiid's energy looked off. Not sure if he's sick, but we'll have to check into that." And then the broadcast kept pointing to this, "Joel Embiid, he doesn't look right. You have to wonder if everything's okay." Did we forget that Joel Embiid is playing with a torn ligament in his thumb, he's coming off a concussion, and he has a broken bone in his face? I don't think it has anything to do with the Sixers culture. I don't think it has anything to do with the fact that he finished runner-up to the Joker for the second consecutive year to win NBA MVP, which is something that Charles Barkley and Shaquille O'Neal were talking about during halftime of the TNT broadcast. I think Joel Embiid isn't feeling well because the man has a broken face, a torn ligament in his thumb, and maybe he's still dealing with concussion symptoms. The national media is reaching for these Joel Embiid narratives right now, and it's straight up ridiculous. The dude is in pain. He's doing things that Ben Simmons would never do. He's displayed throughout the playoffs that he is the NBA MVP, and he's doing his best to will the Sixers to a second-round playoff series, something they haven't done throughout this Joel Embiid era, and he's fighting and clawing just to make it to the Eastern Conference Finals while dealing with all these injuries. It didn't come down to him being sick. It didn't come down to the Sixers culture. It didn't come down to the fact that he's hurt, that he didn't win NBA MVP. He's dealing with a plethora of injuries. That's the real truth. And for the national media to continue to slander Philadelphia, that's just what the national media does. Boom. Game 6, who you got? Let me know in the comments section. Shout out to Will Scott, always bringing the energy. I had to bring the energy as well because I just cannot take this Embiid slander. It's going to be a big one, of course. Type PHI for the Sixers, MIA for the Miami Heat. Get your Game 6 predictions in. Then we'll get to the players that the Sixers can target if James Harden does not return. So James Harden up to this point, it's really been a Jekyll and Hyde tenure for him in a Sixers uniform. First 5 games following the trade with Ben Simmons, he was great. After that, to round out the regular season, he was not good. And so far in the playoffs, he's really been up and down. Now, something to monitor here is that Harden does have a player option. If he opts in, it'll be basically a 1-year contract, which pays him $47.3 million. If he opts out, then James Harden could become a free agent. He's free to sign with any team in the NBA during NBA free agency, which our coverage here on 76ers Now will be litty. That's why you subscribe to the channel. For me, when I watch Harden right now, there's a lot of mileage on the tires. There's a lot of tread on the tires. This guy's usage rate for about a decade straight when he was a scoring champion, an NBA MVP, leading the Rockets to deep playoff runs, he played so much and the offense was so reliant on him where he really had to shoulder the load. And right now, he lacks that burst. He lacks that quick first step. He's lacking some of that explosion. And because of that, he's not the same offensive player. He's not able to get by guys. And because of that, he has struggled offensively throughout the playoffs. Now, of course, he's a great player, NBA top 75. He's going to be in the Hall of Fame. He's one of the best offensive players that we've seen in the history of the NBA. But you have to consider, okay, there's a lot of mileage on the tires, and he can beat guys with his overall basketball IQ because he is a basketball savant. But when he lacks that quick first step, it really does get sluggish at times for James Harden. I think he needs to lose 15 to 20 pounds this offseason. He needs to hit up Chris Paul. He needs to get on that vegan diet. And if he wants to get paid a max contract and remain one of the game's elite players, he has to shed weight. He has to take his body a little bit more seriously because he needs a little bit of that offensive explosion back if he wants to remain one of the best offensive players in the NBA. So without further ado, let's take a look at 3 star players who could replace James Harden if he doesn't play for the Sixers next year. We start with Zach Lavine, who is going to be an unrestricted free agent this summer. Now, a lot of signs do indicate that he's going to go back to Chicago. A lot of loose rumors that he could maybe team up with Damian Lillard and the Portland Trail Blazers. The Lakers have shown a little bit of interest in Zach Lavine, and we're talking about a very good athlete who has pogo sticks as legs, and because of that, he is a very good 3-level scorer, and throughout 5 seasons in Chicago, he's been a straight-up bucket getter. 24.5 points per game. Shooting splits are pretty solid as well. He's connected on about 48% of his field goals, almost 39% from deep. He has better athleticism than James Harden. He's a better scorer at this point of his career than James Harden. In the Olympics, I was really impressed with his defensive effort, and he's also younger than the beard as well. So I think this would be an immediate upgrade, and he gives you more of that wing threat as compared to Harden, who strictly right now is playing the 1 or the 2. As for some of the concerns with Zach Lavine, there are a few. The notable one, it's injuries, and he's missed a lot of time throughout his tenure with the Chicago Bulls. Going back to 2017-18, 58 out of 82 games. You have to remember, he did get that ACL construction several years ago. 2018-19, missed 19 games, and 2019-20, he missed 5, and then the last 2 years combined, he's also been off injured as well. So that's a little bit of a concern for him, given that sometimes he does rely on that athleticism to get buckets and get to the rack. But Zach Lavine is a very good player, and if he doesn't re-sign with Chicago and he becomes an unrestricted free agent, I think Philadelphia will certainly show some interest, and I don't think his on-court fit would clash all that much with Tobias Harris. I want to test you with this question right now because, hey, that's what we do for the people. We pose great questions. We cook up heaters. as we say here at Chat Sports. Pick one between Harden and Lavine. JH for James Harden, ZL for Zach Lavine. Let me know which player that you would ride with in Philadelphia down in the comment section. If you want to bet on the NBA playoffs, you can do so right now thanks to our sportsbook partner, BetUS. Head to chatsports.com/bet. Enter the promo code to my right, chat125 for a 125% deposit bonus. Chase, what does that even mean? I'll do the simple math for you. Even though I failed elementary algebra at Temple University, let's say you put in $100 into your account using that link in that promo code. You get an additional $125 back. 100 plus 125 equals $225 to game with. NBA title odds right now, blows your mind, right? Golden State Warriors leading the charge at plus 165, followed by the Phoenix Suns at plus 325. Do you like the value of the Milwaukee Bucks at plus 750, or maybe even the Miami Heat at plus 700? To simplify the betting odds, as I continue to just break down all of this easy math for you, let's say you put down $1 on the Miami Heat at 7-1 odds to win the NBA championship, and they win it. You get $7 back. Pretty solid value there. If I got that wrong, let me know, folks, but I am terrible at math. I'm getting a round of applause because I am just a math genius. Next Harden replacement on a superstar level, Bradley Beal. Now, he has a player option like James Harden, so he could opt out, he could become a free agent, he could leave our nation's capital, and Bradley Beal, I want to see you play for a playoff contender. Why not come down 95, join forces with Joel Embiid, and play for a real fan base and a real franchise in the Philadelphia 76ers. Now, the concerns with Bradley Beal, not really injuries, even though he's coming off that wrist thumb injury this year that caused him to only play 40 games. It's the drop-off that we saw from 2 years ago to this past year. Now, 2 years ago, he was runner-up in the NBA scoring race right behind Steph Curry, and his averages were phenomenal from 2019 to 2021 during 117 games played. He was a straight-up bucket getter. Now, he doesn't play much defense, but when it comes to finding twine from anywhere on the hardwood, he can certainly do that. 31 points per game during that 2-year stretch, but that dropped off this past year to 23 points per game, less than 5 boards, 6.5 dimes. That number went up a little bit, but the field goal percentage dropped from 47 to 45, and the three-point percentage decreased from 35% to 30%. There was this, too, that we talked about couple months ago now here on the channel, and this came from Bill Simmons and a couple of other, namely marquee NBA reporters, that going into the NBA trade deadline, before it was found out that Bradley Beal was going to be lost for the year, Embiid actually wanted Bradley Beal over James Harden. Then the Bradley Beal injury threw a wrench into the plans. There were also some reports, and Bill Simmons talked about this, that even with Beal's injury, Embiid was still pushing for Beal over Harden, but we know that James Harden is the apple of Daryl Morey's eye. Morey and a couple of his homies in the front office wanted to go Harden over Beal. Could they rectify that and change up course this offseason? That would be pretty fascinating. Now, Philadelphia 76ers now, as a channel here on YouTube, launched last summer, and already we're about to get to 6,000 subscribers to honor the great Dr. J. Julius Irving. 5,924 people are subscribed to the channel right now, and if you are sub, that means that you're a real one, but I also want you to get into the comment section and type me so that I can show you some love in the comment section. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel, you ain't alive. For the best Sixers coverage right here on YouTube, just hit that red subscribe button or plug in that link at the bottom of your screen, youtube.com/76ers TV. Our coverage throughout free agency, the offseason, NBA draft, and during the year, it is better than anybody else on the entire internet. Last James Harden replacement, Donovan Mitchell, Spida. Now, the Jazz, after getting ousted in the first round by the Dallas Mavericks, could look to blow it up. They could trade away D-Mitch. They could trade away Rudy Gobert. They might lose their head coach in Quinn Snyder. And if they do hit the reset button, maybe Donovan Mitchell is on his way out. And if that's the case, could the Sixers pull off a trade for one of the best young offensive players in the NBA? As evidenced by the offensive production over the last 4 years. I've been really impressed with the offensive growth that we've seen from D-Mitch. 2018-19, averaging about 24 points per game. It goes up the following year. 2 years ago, 26.5 points per game, and this past year, 25.5, and the shooting splits have been pretty solid as well. My concern with Donovan Mitchell, he is a sieve defensively, and he is awful on that end of the floor. He is a very good offensive player who's never scared to rise up, especially in the guts of the game, to get some clutch buckets, but defensively, he is certainly a liability. What would it require for the Sixers to get Donovan Mitchell? A sign and trade with James Harden going to Utah potentially, and Donovan Mitchell coming to Philadelphia. It could also be a 3-team deal in order to make this complete. I kind of want to see James Harden go to Utah because it would be absolutely hilarious after he shut down a bunch of nightclubs and strip clubs. He would have to get sent back into Utah, and maybe that would force him to actually lose weight because he wouldn't have any clubs or strip clubs to go to because it is Mormon country out in Utah. Would be pretty interesting if you ask me. Now, I just broke down 3 James Harden replacements who are superstar players in Donovan Mitchell, in Zach Lavine, and Bradley Beal, who could replace the beard if he doesn't return to the Sixers. Before we head on out of here, I want you to get into the comment section and name your favorite James Harden replacement down below. Let's hope that Philadelphia can extend this series at the Wells Fargo Center, Game 6, Thursday night in South Philadelphia, and if they don't, I'll be in shambles, but you'll be in shambles too, and we can all cry together.